Chapter 0. The man Wuo wrote the book that never died. The year is 512 before Christ. A man walks toward the court of King Ho Lu of Wu. He carries 13 chapters of bamboo, no army, no title, no patron. Just a manuscript. His name is Sun Wu. He is about to change how empires think about power. King Ho Lu reads the 13 chapters. He is stunned. He asks the stranger one question. Can your theory of war be tested on women? Sun Wu answers without hesitation. Yes, 180 concubines are led out of the palace. Sun Wu divides them into 2 companies. He places the king's 2 favorite women at their head. He hands them spears. He speaks the commands: eyes front, left turn, right turn, about turn. The women laugh. Sun Wu does not flinch. He says if commands are not clear, the general is to blame. He drills them again. Again the women laugh. This time he says if commands are clear and soldiers disobey, the officers are to blame. He orders the 2 favorites beheaded. The king watches from a pavilion above. He sends down a desperate message. He has lost his taste for meat and drink without them. He begs Sun Wu to spare them. Sun Wu replies with words that would echo for 2,500 years. Having once received His Majesty's commission to be general of his forces, there are certain commands of His Majesty which, acting in that capacity, I am unable to accept. The 2 women die. New leaders are installed. The drum sounds. The concubines march. They turn. They kneel. They stand. They do not utter a sound. Sun Wu sends word to the king. Your soldiers, sire, are now properly drilled and disciplined. They can be put to any use that their sovereign may desire. Bid them go through fire and water, and they will not disobey. The king replies coldly. Let our general cease drilling and return to camp. As for us, we have no wish to come down and inspect the troops. Sun Wu answers quietly. The king is only fond of words, and cannot translate them into deeds. Ho Lu hears the truth in those words. He appoints Sun Wu general of his armies. Together they march west. They crush the state of Chu. They enter Ying, the capital. They put fear into the states of Qi and Qin in the north. The fame of Sun Wu spreads among the feudal princes. That is the story the great historian Sima Qian tells us. It is the only biography of Sun Wu that has survived. And yet the man himself remains a ghost. The Tsochuan, the great chronicle of that age, does not mention Sun Wu at all. It records vulgar plebeians and hireling ruffians. It mentions Ying Kaoshu and Cao Kuei and Chu Chi Wu. It gives details about Sun Wu's contemporaries Wu Yuan and the minister Pei. But it says nothing of the general whose fame and achievements were so brilliant. The omission is glaring. A scholar named Yeshui Hisin argued that the story of the women was a reckless fabrication. He said Sun Wu was invented by theorizing pundits. He said the book was the production of some private scholar living toward the end of the spring and autumn period. Other scholars pushed back. They pointed to archaic words in the text that had fallen out of use by the time of Mencius. They pointed to the allusion in chapter 13 to the ancient system of land tenure that had already passed away. They pointed to armored chariots that had died out before the end of the Chu dynasty. They pointed to the fact that Wu Qi, who died in 381 before Christ, appears to quote Sun Tzu. If Sun Tzu was being quoted a century after he lived, the book must be old. It must be real. The debate has never fully ended. But the voice of the text tells a different story. Read these 13 chapters carefully. You hear a man who has seen armies move. You hear a man who has watched supply lines snap. You hear a man who has calculated the price of a long campaign in silver and in hunger and in widows. The maxims are too sharp to come from a study. They have been distilled from the field. They reflect a mind that is at once a born strategist and a practical soldier. Lionel Giles, the translator, whose words you are about to hear, believed this. He wrote in London in 1910 that the freshness, the sincerity, the acuteness, and the common sense of these sayings quite exclude the idea that they were artificially concocted in the study. The book itself carries the date of its birth inside its lines. In one chapter, Sun Tzu speaks of the soldiers of Yue exceeding his own. Yue was the prime enemy of Wu only after 510 before Christ. Before that, the hereditary enemy had been Chu. Yet Chu is never mentioned in the 13 chapters. So the book must have been written after Chu suffered the great humiliation of 506. It must have been written by a man who lived to see Wu rise. He did not live to see Wu fall. The dates are worth tracing. In 514 before Christ, Ho Lu took the throne of Wu. In 512 he attacked Chu, but was dissuaded from entering Ying, the capital. The Shi Qi mentions Sun Wu as general. In 510 Wu made a successful attack on Yue. This was the first war between the two states. In 506 Ho Lu attacked Chu with the aid of Tong and Sai. The decisive battle of Po Chu was fought. Ying was captured. This is the last mention of Sun Wu in the Shi Qi. In 505 Yue made a raid on Wu in the absence of its army. In 496 Wu attacked Yue, but was defeated at Sui Li. Ho Lu was killed. His son Fu Chai inherited the war. In 473 before Christ, Wu was destroyed by Ko Qian of Yue. The state that produced Sun Tzu vanished from the earth. The book survived. It survived because it does not depend on Wu. It does not depend on any state. It speaks of war itself. For 25 centuries generals have read it. Warlords, emperors, revolutionaries, strategists in boardrooms and on battlefields. The commentary tradition in China alone is enormous. Cao Cao, the warlord emperor of Wei, wrote a famous edition in the 3rd century after Christ. In his preface, he said that of all the books on war, he had read the work of Sun Wu was the profoundest. Tu Mu composed his preface in the middle of the 9th century. Chong Yu, Li Chuan Mei, Yao Chen Ho Shi each added layers of interpretation. Each commentator was a statesman or a soldier. Each one tested the text against his own century of war. What you are about to hear is not just Sun Tzu. It is Sun Tzu filtered through Lionel Giles. It is Giles who in 1910 cut the text into numbered paragraphs. It is Giles who decided which commentator to follow when the characters were ambiguous. It is Giles who defended Sun Tzu against the sloppy translation of Captain Calthrop in 1905. The first English translation had appeared in Tokyo under the title Sanshi. Giles wrote that the translator's knowledge of Chinese was far too scanty to fit him to grapple with the manifold difficulties of Sun Tzu. He called the earlier work excessively bad. He set out to do better. He gave the English-speaking world its first faithful art of war. You will hear Sun Tzu in his own numbered sayings. You will hear the stories the commentators preserved. You will hear of Han H. Sin crossing the river in wooden tubs. You will hear of Sun Pin and the dying fires. You will hear of Cao Cao and the field of corn. You will hear of Qing Ko weeping at the cold river. You will hear of the snake of the Chang Mountains. You will hear of Pan Chao and the burning barbarian camp. You will hear the principle that has been quoted by every strategist since. Know the enemy. Know yourself. You need not fear the result of 100 battles. The book has 13 chapters. Each one is short. Each one is dense. Each one carries the weight of centuries. The first chapter lays plans. The second counts the cost. The third teaches attack by stratagem. The fourth speaks of tactical dispositions. The fifth is energy. The sixth is weak points and strong. The seventh is maneuvering. The eighth is variation of tactics. The ninth is the army on the march. The 10th is terrain. The 11th is the 9 situations. The 12th is the attack by fire. The 13th is the use of spies. You are about to walk through all 13. You will hear the words of a man who lived 2,500 years ago. He spoke of armies and chariots and the price of grain. But he also spoke of forces that have not changed, the mind of the enemy, the morale of the soldier, the cost of delay, the danger of anger, the power of deception. He spoke of war as a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin, a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. He spoke with the cold clarity of a man who had seen what war costs. He warned that no country has ever benefited from prolonged warfare. He warned that the general who wins makes many calculations in his temple before the battle. The general who loses makes but few. He warned that to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. He spoke to King Ho Lu. He speaks to you. Listen carefully. The man who wrote these pages watched kings rise and kings fall. He had one lesson to teach. Victory is won before the battle is fought. It is won in the temple where the calculations are made. It is won in the mind of the general who can see what others cannot. It is won by the one who knows when not to fight. And in the next chapter, we enter the temple itself. We learn the 5 factors that decide every war before the first spear is raised. Chapter 1. Laying Plans. 2 armies face each other across a plain. They are equal in number. They are equal in arms. They have the same sun above them and the same mud beneath their feet. One will win, one will lose. The difference is not in the soldiers. The difference was decided weeks ago. It was decided in a quiet room where one general sat alone. He counted the cost. He weighed the factors. He saw what the other general did not see. He won the battle before the first arrow flew. Sun Tzu opens his book with this sentence: "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. This is not a recommendation. It is a warning. The ruler who treats war lightly will lose his state. The general who treats war lightly will lose his army. War is not the place for hope. War is the place for inquiry." Sun Tzu says the art of war is governed by 5 constant factors. Every general must take them into account when he seeks to determine the conditions in the field. The first is the moral law. The second is heaven. The third is earth. The fourth is the commander. The fifth is method and discipline. Consider each one carefully. The moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger. If your people do not believe in the cause, you have already lost. No order will hold. No sacrifice will be made. The army will dissolve at the first shock. Heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. You do not march 100 li in the dry season without water. You do not fight a winter battle without provisions for the cold. The sky is not decoration. It is a weapon. Earth comprises distances, great and small, danger and security, open ground and narrow passes, the chances of life and death. A general who cannot read the ground will be buried in it. The commander stands for the virtues of wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. Wisdom first. A brave fool is a danger to his own army. A sincere coward is a danger to the cause. The 5 virtues must be held together. Method and discipline are the marshalling of the army in its proper subdivisions, the gradations of rank among the officers, the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army, and the control of military expenditure. Without method, an army is a mob. Without discipline, it is a riot. Sun Tzu says these 5 heads should be familiar to every general. He who knows them will be victorious. He who knows them not will fail. Then he gives 7 questions. He tells you to compare your side against the enemy using these questions. Which of the 2 sovereigns is imbued with the moral law? Which of the 2 generals has the most ability? With whom lie the advantages derived from heaven and earth? On which side is discipline most rigorously enforced? Which army is the stronger? On which side are officers and men more highly trained? In which army is there the greater constancy, both in reward and punishment? By means of these 7 considerations, Sun Tzu says I can forecast victory or defeat. He does not say I can guess. He says I can forecast. Consider each question carefully. The first asks which sovereign is in harmony with his subjects. Without that harmony, no army can be trusted. The second asks which general has more ability. not more courage, ability. The third asks who holds the advantages of weather and ground. These are the factors you cannot control, you can only use them. The fourth asks where discipline is most rigorously enforced. An army that does not punish its own faults will not survive the enemy's. The fifth asks which army is stronger, not only in numbers, stronger in spirit, stronger in esprit de corps. The sixth asks where officers and men are more highly trained. Without constant practice, the officers will be nervous and undecided when mustering for battle. Without constant practice, the general will be wavering and irresolute when the crisis is at hand. The seventh asks in which army there is greater constancy both in reward and punishment. Where merit is properly rewarded and misdeeds summarily punished, the soldiers trust their leaders. Where they do not, the soldiers doubt everything. These 7 questions do not promise victory. They promise clarity. They show you where you stand before the battle begins. The general that hearkens to his counsel and acts upon it will conquer. Let such a one be retained in command. The general that hearkens not to his counsel nor acts upon it will suffer defeat. Let such a one be dismissed. The commander who insists on his own folly is more dangerous than the enemy. A story is told of Sun Tzu in the 3rd century after Christ. He was a strict disciplinarian. He had laid down a severe regulation against injury to standing crops. Anyone who trampled a field of grain would be put to death. One day his own horse shied. It bolted into a field of corn. Sun Tzu condemned himself to death. His officers begged him to reconsider. He could not lose his commander on the eve of battle. In lieu of losing his head, he cut off his hair. He gave his hair to the army as a symbol of his submission to the law. His own comment on this passage of Sun Tzu was characteristically curt. When you lay down a law, see that it is not disobeyed. If it is disobeyed, the offender must be put to death, even if the offender is yourself. Sun Tzu then turns to the question of circumstances. While heeding the profit of my counsel, avail yourself also of any helpful circumstances over and beyond the ordinary rules. According as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. Sun Tzu is a practical soldier. He will have none of the bookish theoric. He tells you the main laws of strategy can be stated clearly enough. But you must be guided by the actions of the enemy in attempting to secure a favorable position. On the eve of the Battle of Waterloo, Lord Uxbridge, commanding the cavalry, went to the Duke of Wellington. He wanted to know the Duke's plans and calculations for the morrow. He explained that he might suddenly find himself commander-in-chief. He would be unable to frame new plans in a critical moment. The Duke listened quietly. He said, "Who will attack the first tomorrow, I or Bonaparte?" "Lord Uxbridge," answered Bonaparte. The Duke said, "Bonaparte has not given me any idea of his projects. As my plans will depend upon his, how can you expect me to tell you what mine are?" That is what Sun Tzu meant. Plans are not eternal. They are alive. They change with the enemy. And now Sun Tzu speaks the most famous sentence in the book. All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. Hold out baits to entice the enemy. Feign disorder and crush him. If he is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he has superior strength, evade him. If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak that he may grow arrogant. If he is taking his ease, give him no rest. If his forces are united, separate them. Attack him where he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected. These military devices leading to victory must not be divulged beforehand. A commentator tells us that the good tactician plays with his adversary as a cat plays with a mouse. He first feigns weakness and immobility. Then suddenly he pounces. Consider what this means in practice. You have a strong cavalry hidden behind a hill. You send a small detachment forward to provoke the enemy. The detachment pretends to panic. It flees in disorder. The enemy pursues. It pours around the hill. It enters the trap. Your cavalry crashes into its flank. The enemy breaks. This is feigning disorder and crushing him. Or you want to draw the enemy out of a fortified position. You withdraw your main force as if afraid. You leave the campfires burning. You leave the tents standing. The enemy thinks you have fled in the night. He marches out to pursue. You are waiting in the woods 2 miles ahead. This is appearing where you are not expected. The principle is always the same. Make the enemy see what is not there. Hide what is there. Make him believe what is false. Hide what is true. War is not a contest of strength. It is a contest of perception. Now Sun Tzu closes the chapter with the image of the temple. In ancient China, when a general was about to take the field, a temple was set apart for his use. There he elaborated his plan of campaign. He made his calculations. Sun Tzu says the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple before the battle is fought. The general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand. Thus do many calculations lead to victory and few calculations to defeat. How much more no calculation at all? It is by attention to this point that I can foresee who is likely to win or lose. This is the foundation of the whole book. Victory is decided before the army marches. It is decided in the temple. It is decided by calculation. The general who calculates more wins. The general who calculates less loses. The general who does not calculate at all is already dead. He simply does not know it yet. That is the power of laying plans. Not a theory. A discipline. A discipline that decides who rules and who is ruled. And in the next chapter, we meet the cost of forgetting this discipline. We see what happens when the army marches without counting the price of every mile. Chapter 2. Waging War. A king sends an army of 100,000 men to the frontier. He believes he is strong. He is wrong. Every day that army stays in the field, it eats 1,000 ounces of silver. Every day it eats the labor of 700,000 families. Every day its weapons grow a little duller. Every day its soldiers grow a little more tired. The king does not see this. He sees only the map. He sees the enemy's capital marked in red. He thinks the road is short. He does not know that the road is the enemy. Sun Tzu begins this chapter with the cost. In the operations of war where there are in the field 1,000 swift chariots, as many heavy chariots, and 100,000 mail-clad soldiers, with provisions enough to carry them 1,000 li. The expenditure at home and at the front, including entertainment of guests, small items such as glue and paint, and some spent on chariots and armor, will reach the total of 1,000 ounces of silver per day. Such is the cost of raising an army of 100,000 men, 1,000 ounces of silver every day. This is not poetry. This is accounting. Sun Tzu wants the general to think like a steward. He wants him to count every coin before he counts every soldier. When you engage in actual fighting, Sun Tzu says, if victory is long in coming, the men's weapons will grow dull, and their ardor will be damped. If you lay siege to a town, you will exhaust your strength. Again, if the campaign is protracted, the resources of the state will not be equal to the strain. Now when your weapons are dulled, your ardor damped, your strength exhausted, and your treasure spent, other chieftains will spring up to take advantage of your extremity. Then no man, however wise, will be able to avert the consequences that must ensue. This is the nightmare of every ruler. You march out to destroy one enemy. You come home to find 2 more have risen behind you. The state that won the war loses the peace. The state that lost the war gains an ally. This is what delay does. Sun Tzu then says something that sounds like a paradox. Thus, though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been seen associated with long delays. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. A general may be slow. A general may even be stupid. But if he is fast, he may still win. A general may be brilliant. A general may plan perfectly, but if he is slow, he will lose. The commentators argue about this passage. Some say Sun Tzu means that stupid haste is better than clever dilatoriness. Others say he means that no cleverness can save a long war. The example of Fabius Cunctator comes to mind. Fabius deliberately measured the endurance of Rome against that of Hannibal's isolated army. He thought the invader would suffer more from a long campaign in a strange country. He refused to give battle. He followed at a distance. He harassed the foragers. He cut off stragglers. He watched Hannibal's army shrink. It is a moot question whether his tactics would have proved successful in the long run. Their reversal led to Cannae. The Romans grew impatient with delay. They demanded a battle. They got one. At Cannae, 50,000 Roman soldiers died in a single afternoon. That was the price of clever dilatoriness, but that only establishes a negative presumption in Fabius's favor. Sun Tzu is not interested in clever delays. He is interested in speed. It is only one who is thoroughly acquainted with the evils of war that can thoroughly understand the profitable way of carrying it on. That is with rapidity. Only one who knows the disastrous effects of a long war can realize the supreme importance of rapidity in bringing it to a close. The skillful soldier does not raise a second levy. Neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. Once war is declared, he will not waste precious time in waiting for reinforcements, nor will he turn his army back for fresh supplies. He crosses the enemy's frontier without delay. This may seem an audacious policy to recommend, but with all great strategists from Julius Caesar to Napoleon Bonaparte, the value of time, that is being a little ahead of your opponent, has counted for more than either numerical superiority or the nicest calculations with regard to commissariat. Bring war material with you from home, but forage on the enemy. Thus the army will have food enough for its needs. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own, and likewise a single picule of his provender is equivalent to 20 from one's own store, because 20 cartloads will be consumed in the process of transporting 1 cartload to the front. This is a calculation every general must understand. A supply line is not free. Every mile costs food. Every cart costs guards. Every guard costs a soldier not at the front. The army that feeds itself from enemy soil is 20 times stronger than the army that feeds itself from home. This is why the wise general takes what he needs from the country he invades. He does not burden his own people. He does not drain his own treasury. He turns the enemy's fields into his storehouse. He turns the enemy's horses into his cavalry. He turns the enemy's weapons into his arsenal. Every coin the enemy loses is a coin the general does not have to ask his sovereign for. Every soldier the enemy loses is a soldier the general does not have to conscript from his own villages. War must feed war, or it will starve the state that started it. Sun Tzu turns to the question of morale. Now, in order to kill the enemy, our men must be roused to anger. That there may be advantage from defeating the enemy, they must have their rewards. Therefore, in chariot fighting, when 10 or more chariots have been taken, those should be rewarded who took the first. Our own flags should be substituted for those of the enemy, and the chariots mingled and used in conjunction with ours. The captured soldiers should be kindly treated and kept. This is called using the conquered foe to augment one's own strength. The general who wastes captured men wastes his own future. The captured soldier has knowledge of his former comrades. He knows the terrain. He knows the enemy's habits. He can be turned. He can fight for you with the same courage he fought against you, if you treat him well. A captured army is not a burden. It is a resource. A wise general knows this. He does not slaughter prisoners. He does not starve them. He gives them food from his own pot. He gives them blankets from his own tent. He speaks to them with respect. And in return, they fight for him. They fight harder than his own men. Because they have something to prove. They have switched sides. They must show their new master that they are loyal. Sun Tzu's principle is simple. You do not weaken the enemy by killing his soldiers. You weaken him by turning them. The general who kills 1,000 captured soldiers has gained nothing. The general who turns 1,000 captured soldiers has gained 1,000 men. Sun Tzu closes the chapter with a single line that should hang above every ruler's bed. In war, then, let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. Soldiers are not to be used as playthings. War is not a thing to be trifled with. And then he says something that should haunt every general. Thus it may be known that the leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or in peril. The general is not just a soldier. He is the keeper of the nation. If he wastes the army, he wastes the country. If he delays the war, he drains the treasury. If he loses the battle, he loses the peace. Every decision he makes in the field touches every family in the state. He carries that weight whether he knows it or not. Consider what delay really costs. Poverty of the state exchequer causes an army to be maintained by contributions from a distance. Contributing to maintain an army at a distance causes the people to be impoverished. On the other hand, the proximity of an army causes prices to go up, and high prices cause the people's substance to be drained away. When their substance is drained away, the peasantry will be afflicted by heavy exactions. With this loss of substance and exhaustion of strength, the homes of the people will be stripped bare, and 3/10 of their incomes will be dissipated, while government expenses for broken chariots, worn-out horses, breastplates and helmets, bows and arrows, spears and shields, protective mantlets, draught oxen and heavy wagons, will amount to 4/10 of its total revenue. A long war eats the people from both ends. The army takes from the fields, the treasury takes from the people. The cost runs in both directions at once. The general who counts the cost will fight only when he must. He will fight only when he can win. He will fight only as long as he must, and he will end the war the moment the object is achieved. That is the lesson of this chapter. Victory, not vanity. Speed, not spectacle. Calculations, not courage. A kingdom is won by the general who knows the price of every mile. And in the next chapter we learn that the greatest victory of all is the one won without a single sword being drawn. Chapter 3. Attack by Stratagem. In 1870, the French army marched out to meet the Prussians. They were confident, they were brave, they were well armed. Within weeks they were surrounded at Sedan. Over 80,000 soldiers laid down their weapons. The Prussian commander was Helmuth von Moltke. He had won without a single decisive battle. The French army simply collapsed. It had been outmaneuvered before it could fight. That is the supreme excellence Sun Tzu speaks of here. In the practical art of war, Sun Tzu says the best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. So too it is better to capture an army entire than to destroy it. To capture a regiment, a detachment, or a company entire than to destroy them. The general who destroys what he could have captured is a fool. He wins the field but loses the prize. He gains a graveyard and loses a kingdom. Sun Tzu speaks the most famous line in all military writing. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Moltke's triumph at Sedan was won practically without bloodshed. The capitulation of the huge French army happened because the French had been maneuvered into a position from which they could not escape. They surrendered because they had no other choice. That is what Sun Tzu means. The enemy breaks because he must break, not because you have killed him, but because you have made it impossible for him to fight. Sun Tzu ranks the forms of generalship. Thus, the highest form of generalship is to balk the enemy's plans. The next best is to prevent the junction of the enemy's forces. The next in order is to attack the enemy's army in the field. And the worst policy of all is to besiege walled cities. The worst policy, siege. Sun Tzu hates sieges. The rule is not to besiege walled cities if it can possibly be avoided. the preparation of mantlets, movable shelters, and various implements of war will take up 3 whole months, and the piling up of mounds over against the walls will take 3 months more. 6 months wasted before a single assault can begin. And then the general loses his temper. The general, unable to control his irritation, will launch his men to the assault like swarming ants, with the result that 1/3 of his men are slain, while the town still remains untaken. Such are the disastrous effects of a siege. We are reminded of the terrible losses of the Japanese before Port Arthur. In the most recent siege history had to record, thousands of soldiers died charging machine guns up a hill they could not take. Sun Tzu saw this coming 2,400 years before it happened. Had the Boers acted on this principle in 1899? Had they refrained from dissipating their strength before Kimberley, before Mafeking, before Ladysmith? It is more than probable that they would have been masters of the situation before the British were ready seriously to oppose them. The Boers besieged cities they should have ignored. They paid for it with their country. Think of what a siege really is. The general sits outside a wall. His men dig trenches. His engineers build mounds. His carpenters build mantlets. His smiths sharpen weapons. Every day the army consumes its own supplies. Every day the defenders grow stronger behind their walls. Every day the general's reputation weakens. His officers lose patience. His soldiers grow bored and sick. Disease sets in. Desertions begin. The enemy inside the walls watches all of this. He sends out sorties. He burns the siege works. He waits. The general outside the walls is losing a war he has not yet begun to fight. That is why Sun Tzu calls siege the worst policy. It is the policy of the impatient. It is the policy of the unimaginative. It is the policy of those who cannot think of any other way. Sun Tzu continues, "Therefore the skillful leader subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them. He overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field. With his forces intact, he will dispute the mastery of the empire, and thus, without losing a man, his triumph will be complete. This is the method of attacking by stratagem." Then Sun Tzu gives the famous ratios. It is the rule in war. If our forces are 10 to the enemy's 1 to surround him, if 5 to 1 to attack him, if twice as numerous to divide our army into 2, if equally matched we can offer battle, if slightly inferior in numbers we can avoid the enemy, if quite unequal in every way we can flee from him. Hence, though an obstinate fight may be made by a small force, in the end it must be captured by the larger force. In other words, it is magnificent, but it is not war. A small force that fights to the death is heroic. It is also dead, and the war is lost. Now Sun Tzu turns to the role of the general. Now the general is the bulwark of the state. If the bulwark is complete at all points, the state will be strong. If the bulwark is defective, the state will be weak. There are 3 ways in which a ruler can bring misfortune upon his army. The first is by commanding the army to advance or to retreat, being ignorant of the fact that it cannot obey. This is called hobbling the army. It is like tying together the legs of a thoroughbred so that it cannot gallop. The second is by attempting to govern an army in the same way as he administers a kingdom, being ignorant of the conditions which obtain in an army. This causes restlessness in the soldiers' minds. The military sphere and the civil sphere are wholly distinct. You cannot handle an army in kid gloves. The third is by employing the officers of his army without discrimination, through ignorance of the military principle of adaptation to circumstances. This shakes the confidence of the soldiers. When the army is restless and distrustful, trouble is sure to come from the other feudal princes. This is simply bringing anarchy into the army and flinging victory away. The ruler who interferes from a distance destroys his own army. The ruler who does not trust his general destroys his own army. The ruler who promotes officers without judgment destroys his own army. Sun Tzu then gives the 5 essentials for victory. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. He will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. He will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all its ranks. He will win who prepared himself waits to take the enemy unprepared. He will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. Napoleon owed much of his extraordinary success to the fact that he was not hampered by any central authority. He was in fact general and sovereign in one. There was no palace sending him contradictory orders. There was no minister telling him to advance when he should retreat. He had no one to obey but his own judgment. That was his advantage. That was the advantage no Chinese general could ever have. The sovereign was always there. The palace was always watching. The orders from the capital always arrived at the worst moment. Sun Tzu knew this. He knew that the greatest danger to an army was often not the enemy in front. It was the ruler behind, the prince who sends instructions from a comfortable room. The minister who thinks he understands war because he has read a book. The sovereign who fears a bold move because bold moves are dangerous. Each of these can destroy an army more surely than the enemy. The sovereign must trust the general he has chosen. If he cannot trust him, he should not have chosen him. If he has chosen him, he must let him fight. Victory lies in the knowledge of these 5 points. And now Sun Tzu closes with the second most famous line in the book. Hence the saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. In the year 383, after Christ Fu Xian, Prince of Qin, marched with a vast army against the Qin Emperor, he was warned not to despise an enemy who could command the services of such men as Shi An and Huan Cheng. He boastfully replied, I have the population of 8 provinces at my back, infantry and horsemen to the number of 1 million. Why, they could dam up the Yangtze River itself by merely throwing their whips into the stream. What danger have I to fear? His forces were soon after disastrously routed at the Fei River. He was obliged to beat a hasty retreat. He knew neither the enemy nor himself. His army was scattered. His kingdom fell. That is what Sun Tzu warns against. Numbers are not strength. Strength is not victory. Victory is knowledge. Know the enemy. Know yourself. The 2 together make 100 battles safe. The 2 apart make every battle a gamble. That is the principle of attack by stratagem. You do not need to win 100 battles. You need to make it impossible for the enemy to fight. And in the next chapter we meet the general who is so well prepared that the enemy cannot even find him to attack. Chapter 4. Tactical Dispositions. In the 2nd century before Christ, a Chinese general named Han Xin marched against the army of Chao. The Chao army was vastly superior in number. It was strongly entrenched in the city of Chang'an. Han Xin halted his men outside the walls. He turned to his officers. He said, Gentlemen, we are going to annihilate the enemy and shall meet again at dinner. The officer hardly took his words seriously. They gave a very dubious assent. But Han Xin had already worked out in his mind the details of a clever stratagem. He foresaw exactly how the day would unfold. By the next morning, the Chao army had been annihilated. Han Xin had dinner with his officers. This is what Sun Tzu means when he speaks of the clever fighter. The good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat, and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy. To secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands. But the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. This is the foundation of all tactics. You cannot guarantee victory. You can guarantee that you will not be defeated. You do that by your own discipline. You do that by your own position. You do that by your own preparations. Then you wait. The enemy will give you the opportunity. He will make a mistake. He will expose a flank. He will move too soon or too late. He will become overconfident or fearful. When he does, you strike. Thus the good fighter is able to secure himself against defeat, but cannot make certain of defeating the enemy. Hence the saying, one may know how to conquer without being able to do it. Security against defeat implies defensive tactics. Ability to defeat the enemy means taking the offensive. Standing on the defensive indicates insufficient strength. Attacking a superabundance of strength. The general who is skilled in defense hides in the most secret recesses of the earth. He who is skilled in attack flashes forth from the topmost heights of heaven. Thus, on the one hand, we have ability to protect ourselves. On the other, a victory that is complete. This is metaphor. Sun Tzu does not mean bury your army underground. He means conceal your dispositions so thoroughly that the enemy cannot find you. He does not mean descend from the sky. He means strike with such suddenness that the enemy has no time to react. The army that cannot be found cannot be attacked. The army that cannot be anticipated cannot be defended against. This is the whole art. Sun Tzu continues, to see victory only when it is within the ken of the common herd is not the acme of excellence. Neither is it the acme of excellence if you fight and conquer, and the whole empire says well done. True excellence is to plan secretly, to move surreptitiously, to foil the enemy's intentions and balk his schemes, so that at last the day may be won without shedding a drop of blood. To lift an autumn hair is no sign of great strength. To see sun and moon is no sign of sharp sight. To hear the noise of thunder is no sign of a quick ear. What the ancients called a clever fighter is one who not only wins, but excels in winning with ease. He wins his battles by making no mistakes. Making no mistakes is what establishes the certainty of victory, for it means conquering an enemy that is already defeated. A commentator tells us of Wu Huo, who could lift a tripod weighing 250 stone. Of Li Chu, who at a distance of 100 paces could see objects no bigger than a mustard seed. Of Shi Kuang, a blind musician who could hear the footsteps of a mosquito. These men had remarkable powers. But Sun Tzu does not admire them. Lifting a heavy weight is not strength, it is just lifting. Seeing what is visible is not sight, it is just seeing. Hearing what is loud is not hearing, it is just hearing. The true expert sees what is not yet visible. He hears what is not yet loud. He wins the battle that has not yet begun. Hence his victories bring him neither reputation for wisdom nor credit for courage. Inasmuch as his victories are gained over circumstances that have not come to light, the world at large knows nothing of them. And he wins no reputation for wisdom. Inasmuch as the hostile state submits before there has been any bloodshed, he receives no credit for courage. The general who wins famous battles is not the greatest general. The general who wins battles no one notices is the greatest general. His skill is invisible, his victories look like accidents. He is never praised because no one understands what he has done. Hence, the skillful fighter puts himself into a position which makes defeat impossible, and does not miss the moment for defeating the enemy. Thus it is that in war the victorious strategist only seeks battle after the victory has been won, whereas he who is destined to defeat first fights and afterwards looks for victory. This is one of the deepest lines in the book. The victorious general wins first, then fights. The defeated general fights first, then hopes to win. The victorious general has already done the work. The battle is just the announcement. The defeated general gambles. He throws the dice and hopes. Hope is not a strategy. The consummate leader cultivates the moral law and strictly adheres to method and discipline. Thus it is in his power to control success. In respect of military method we have firstly measurement, secondly estimation of quantity, thirdly calculation, fourthly balancing of chances, fifthly victory. Measurement owes its existence to earth, estimation of quantity to measurement, calculation to estimation of quantity. balancing of chances to calculation, and victory to balancing of chances. This sounds abstract. It is not. It is the chain of calculation every general must walk through. You measure the ground. You estimate the enemy's strength. You calculate the odds. You balance the chances. You win. Skip a step and you lose. A victorious army opposed to a routed one is as a pound's weight placed in the scale against a single grain. The advantage is enormous. The discipline gives the army weight. The morale gives it weight. The position gives it weight. A demoralized army has no weight. It cannot hold the field even if its numbers are equal. The onrush of a conquering force is like the bursting of pent-up waters into a chasm 1,000 fathoms deep. So much for tactical dispositions. The image stays with you, a river held back by a dam. Behind the dam, the water grows heavier every day. The general has done the work. He has measured the ground. He has estimated the enemy. He has balanced the chances. He has built the dam. He has filled the water. The moment comes. He opens the gate. The water falls. Nothing can stop it. That is what tactical dispositions mean. Not the order of men on a battlefield. The order of preparation before the battle. The order that makes defeat impossible. That makes victory inevitable. The good fighter does not hope to win. He has already won. The battle is just the moment the enemy finds out. That is the power of tactical dispositions, the art of being already victorious before anyone else knows it. Consider the general who has prepared everything. He has chosen the ground. He has fed his men. He has rested his horses. He has sent out scouts. He has studied the enemy. He has laid his plans. He has built his dam. He has filled his water. When the enemy attacks, the general does not panic. He has already decided what he will do. When the enemy retreats, the general does not chase wildly. He has already decided how far to pursue. When the enemy offers a bait, the general does not take it. He has already recognized the trap. Every move the enemy makes has already been considered. Every move the general makes has already been chosen. The enemy is fighting a script. The general is the author. That is what Sun Tzu means by conquering an enemy that is already defeated. The defeat has happened in the temple. It has happened in the calculations. It has happened in the dispositions. The battle on the field is just the formality. That is the power of tactical dispositions. And in the next chapter, we learn how the energy of that victory is released. We learn the difference between the direct and the indirect. The blow that comes from where the enemy is looking, and the blow that comes from where he is not. Chapter 5. Energy in 204 before Christ, the general Han Xin faced the army of Chao at the Chingsing Pass. He had 10,000 men. The Chao army was vastly larger. It held the high ground. Han Xin marched his men out of the pass with drums beating. He engaged the enemy. Then he and his colleague fled. They left their drums behind. They left their banner behind. They ran to a division they had placed with its back to the river Ti. The Chao army laughed. They thought the Han general was a coward. They abandoned their fortifications. They poured down the slope in pursuit. They wanted the trophies. They wanted Han Xin's head. What they did not see was the 2,000 horsemen Han Xin had hidden in the mountains. The moment the Chao ramparts were empty, the horsemen galloped in. They tore down the Chao banners. They raised the red flags of Han. When the Chao army turned back from the pursuit, they saw the red flags above their own walls. They thought their king had been captured. They broke. They ran. The Han army fell on them from both sides. It was a slaughter. Han Xin had won with a smaller army against a larger one. He had won by dividing his force into two parts. One part visible, one part hidden. The visible part was the bait. The hidden part was the strike. That is the art of direct and indirect. That is what Sun Tzu means by energy. The control of a large force is the same in principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing up their numbers. Fighting with a large army under your command is nowise different from fighting with a small one. It is merely a question of instituting signs and signals to ensure that your whole host may withstand the brunt of the enemy's attack and remain unshaken. This is effected by maneuvers, direct and indirect. That the impact of your army may be like a grindstone dashed against an egg. This is effected by the science of weak points and strong. Sun Tzu introduces one of the most important ideas in the book: the Chung and the Qi, the direct and the indirect. The commentators struggled for centuries to define these terms. Li Chuan said facing the enemy is Chung, making lateral diversions is Qi. Chia Lin said in presence of the enemy your troops should be arrayed in normal fashion, but in order to secure victory abnormal maneuvers must be employed. Mei Yao Chen said, Qi is active, Cheng is passive. Passivity means waiting for an opportunity. Activity brings the victory itself. The Tang Emperor Taizong went to the root of the matter. A Qi maneuver may be Chung if we make the enemy look upon it as Chung. Then our real attack will be Qi and vice versa. The whole secret lies in confusing the enemy so that he cannot fathom our real intent. To put it more clearly, any attack or operation is Cheng, on which the enemy has had his attention fixed. That is Qi, which takes him by surprise or comes from an unexpected quarter. If the enemy perceives a movement meant to be Qi, it immediately becomes Cheng. The categories are not fixed. They flow into each other. In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle. But indirect methods will be needed in order to secure victory. Indirect tactics efficiently applied are inexhaustible as heaven and earth, unending as the flow of rivers and streams. Like the sun and moon they end, but to begin anew. Like the 4 seasons they pass away, but to return once more. There are not more than 5 musical notes. Yet the combinations of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. There are not more than 5 primary colors. Yet in combination they produce more hues than can ever be seen. There are not more than 5 cardinal tastes. Yet combinations of them yield more flavors than can ever be tasted. In battle, there are not more than 2 methods of attack, the direct and the indirect. Yet these 2 in combination give rise to an endless series of maneuvers. The direct and the indirect lead on to each other in turn. It is like moving in a circle. You never come to an end. Who can exhaust the possibilities of their combination? This is the heart of energy. 2 simple elements, combined endlessly, like the alphabet. 26 letters, infinite books. Sun Tzu turns to the question of timing. The onset of troops is like the rush of a torrent which will even roll stones along in its course. The quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. Therefore the good fighter will be terrible in his onset, and prompt in his decision. Energy may be likened to the bending of a crossbow, decision to the releasing of the trigger. This is the moment of the strike. The crossbow is bent by all the preparation. The trigger is pulled at the right moment. The arrow flies. The story is told of Nelson at Trafalgar. The victory went into action at hardly more than drifting pace. She was for several minutes exposed to a storm of shot and shell before replying with a single gun. Nelson coolly waited until he was within close range. When the broadside he brought to bear worked fearful havoc on the enemy's nearest ships, that was the moment. Nelson had bent the crossbow by sailing slowly toward the enemy line. He had absorbed their fire without returning it. He had let them waste their shot. Then at the right moment he released the trigger. The broadside was devastating. That is the art of timing. Sun Tzu continues. Amid the turmoil and tumult of battle there may be seeming disorder, and yet no real disorder at all. Amid confusion and chaos your array may be without head or tail, yet it will be proof against defeat. Simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline. Simulated fear postulates courage. Simulated weakness postulates strength. In order to make the enemy believe you are weak, you must be strong. In order to make the enemy believe you are confused, you must be perfectly disciplined. A story is told of Cao Tzu, the first Han emperor. Wishing to crush the Haexiongnu, he sent out spies to report on their condition. The Haexiongnu, forewarned, carefully concealed all their able-bodied men and well-fed horses. They only allowed infirm soldiers and emaciated cattle to be seen. The result was that the spies, one and all, recommended the emperor to deliver his attack. Lu Qing alone opposed them. He said, when two countries go to war, they are naturally inclined to make an ostentatious display of their strength. Yet our spies have seen nothing but old age and infirmity. This is surely some ruse on the part of the enemy. It would be unwise for us to attack. The emperor disregarded this advice. He fell into the trap. He found himself surrounded at Poteng. That is what simulated weakness can do. It can lure an emperor to his ruin. Sun Tzu continues. Thus one who is skillful at keeping the enemy on the move maintains deceitful appearances according to which the enemy will act. He sacrifices something that the enemy may snatch at it. By holding out baits, he keeps him on the march. Then, with a body of picked men, he lies in wait for him. The clever combatant looks to the effect of combined energy, and does not require too much from individuals. Hence his ability to pick out the right men and to utilize combined energy. When he utilizes combined energy, his fighting men become, as it were, like unto rolling logs or stones. For it is the nature of a log or stone to remain motionless on level ground, and to move when on a slope, if four-cornered to come to a standstill, but if round-shaped to go rolling down. Thus the energy developed by good fighting men is as the momentum of a round stone rolled down a mountain thousands of feet in height. So much on the subject of energy. Hold this image. A round stone at the top of a mountain. It is small, it looks harmless, it is not moving, but it is at the top, it is round. The slope is steep. One push and it will roll. As it rolls, it gathers weight. As it gathers weight, it gathers speed. Nothing in its path can stop it. That is energy. The stone did not become powerful. The stone was always powerful. It only needed the slope. It only needed the push. The general's job is to find the slope. The general's job is to give the push. Then the stone does the rest. That is the art of energy. Not strength, not size, position and timing. And in the next chapter, we learn where the slope is. We learn to see the weak points and the strong. We learn that the enemy who seems everywhere is really nowhere. Chapter 6. Weak points and strong. In the year 228, after Christ the strategist Zhuge Liang occupied the city of Yangping, he had very few troops. The Wei general Sima I was marching toward him with a large army. Zhuge Liang should have retreated. He should have fortified. He should have called for reinforcements. He did none of these things. He struck his colors. He stopped the beating of the drums. He flung open the city gates. He placed a few men on the walls. They were sweeping the ground. They were sprinkling the dust. They were calm. Sima I approached the city. He looked at the open gates. He looked at the sweepers. He looked at the silence. He suspected an ambush. He turned his army around. He marched away. Zhuge Liang held the city without firing a single arrow. This is the art Sun Tzu teaches here. The art of appearing where you are not. The art of being absent where you appear. Whoever is first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. Whoever is second in the field and has to hasten to battle will arrive exhausted. Therefore the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. This is the first principle. You set the terms, you choose the ground, you pick the time. The enemy responds. The enemy reacts. The enemy is always one step behind. By holding out advantages to him, you can cause the enemy to approach of his own accord, or, by inflicting damage, you can make it impossible for the enemy to draw near. If the enemy is taking his ease, you can harass him. If well supplied with food, you can starve him out. If quietly encamped, you can force him to move. Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend. March swiftly to places where you are not expected. An army may march great distances without distress if it marches through country where the enemy is not. You can be sure of succeeding in your attacks if you only attack places which are undefended. You can ensure the safety of your defense if you only hold positions that cannot be attacked. Hence, that general is skillful in attack whose opponent does not know what to defend. And he is skillful in defense whose opponent does not know what to attack. This aphorism puts the whole art of war into a nutshell. O divine art of subtlety and secrecy, through you we learn to be invisible, through you inaudible, and hence we can hold the enemy's fate in our hands. You may advance and be absolutely irresistible if you make for the enemy's weak points. You may retire and be safe from pursuit if your movements are more rapid than those of the enemy. If we wish to fight the enemy, can be forced to an engagement, even though he be sheltered behind a high rampart and a deep ditch. All we need do is to attack some other place that he will be obliged to relieve. If we do not wish to fight, we can prevent the enemy from engaging us, even though the lines of our encampment be merely traced out on the ground. All we need do is to throw something odd and unaccountable in his way. This is what Zhuge Liang did at Yangping. He threw something odd in Sima Ai's way. The open gates, the silent sweepers. It was bluff. It worked. Sun Tzu turns to the question of concentration. By discovering the enemy's dispositions and remaining invisible ourselves, we can keep our forces concentrated while the enemy's must be divided. We can form a single united body, while the enemy must split up into fractions. Hence there will be a whole pitted against separate parts of a whole, which means that we shall be many to the enemy's few. And if we are able thus to attack an inferior force with a superior one, our opponents will be in dire straits. The spot where we intend to fight must not be made known, for then the enemy will have to prepare against a possible attack at several different points. And his forces being thus distributed in many directions, the numbers we shall have to face at any given point will be proportionately few. For should the enemy strengthen his van, he will weaken his rear. Should he strengthen his rear, he will weaken his van. Should he strengthen his left, he will weaken his right. Should he strengthen his right, he will weaken his left. If he sends reinforcements everywhere, he will everywhere be weak. Numerical weakness comes from having to prepare against possible attacks. Numerical strength from compelling our adversary to make these preparations against us. Frederick the Great wrote in his instructions to his generals, "A defensive war is apt to betray us into too frequent detachment." Those generals who have had but little experience attempt to protect every point, while those who are better acquainted with their profession, having only the capital object in view, guard against a decisive blow and acquiesce in smaller misfortunes to avoid greater. The highest generalship is to compel the enemy to disperse his army, and then to concentrate superior force against each fraction in turn. Knowing the place and the time of the coming battle, we may concentrate from the greatest distances in order to fight. Among many such successful junctions, which military history records, one of the most dramatic and decisive was the appearance of Blücher just at the critical moment on the field of Waterloo. But if neither time nor place be known, then the left wing will be impotent to succor the right equally impotent to succor the left, the van unable to relieve the rear, or the rear to support the van. How much more so if the furthest portions of the army are anything under 100 li apart, and even the nearest are separated by several li. Though according to my estimate the soldiers of UA exceed our own in number. That shall advantage them nothing in the matter of victory. I say then that victory can be achieved. Though the enemy be stronger in numbers, we may prevent him from fighting. Scheme so as to discover his plans and the likelihood of their success. Rouse him and learn the principle of his activity or inactivity. Force him to reveal himself so as to find out his vulnerable spots. Carefully compare the opposing army with your own, so that you may know where strength is superabundant and where it is deficient. In making tactical dispositions, the highest pitch you can attain is to conceal them. Conceal your dispositions, and you will be safe from the prying of the subtlest spies, from the machinations of the wisest brains. How victory may be produced for them out of the enemy's own tactics, that is what the multitude cannot comprehend. All men can see the tactics whereby I conquer. But what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory. But let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. Military tactics are like unto water, for water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak. Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. Therefore, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions. He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent, and thereby succeed in winning, may be called a heaven-born captain. The 5 elements are not always equally predominant. The 4 seasons make way for each other in turn. There are short days and long. The moon has its periods of waning and waxing. This is the closing image of the chapter, water. The most adaptable substance in nature. It has no shape of its own. It takes the shape of whatever contains it. It flows around obstacles. It seeks the lowest point. It wears down rock. It nourishes all things. Be like water, Sun Tzu says. Do not have a fixed plan. Have a fixed principle. The principle is to avoid the strong and strike the weak. The application of that principle changes with every enemy, with every ground, with every day. The general who fights the same way twice is a fool. The general who adapts to every situation is a master. That is the art of weak points and strong. You do not need a larger army. You need a smaller army in the right place. You do not need to attack everywhere. You need to attack where the enemy is not. You do not need to defend everywhere. You need to hold what cannot be attacked. And in the next chapter we learn how to march. We learn the most difficult art of all, the art of moving an army across country without losing it before the battle begins. Chapter 7. MANOEUVRING. In the 3rd century before Christ, a general named Chao, she was ordered to relieve a besieged city. The city was called Ou. The enemy was the army of Qin. The distance was great. The country between was rugged and difficult. The king of Chao had first asked the old general Lian Po. Lian Po had said the distance was too great, the country too rugged. He refused to march. The king then turned to Chao Shi. Chao Shi admitted the march was hazardous, but he said something memorable. He said, "We shall be like 2 rats fighting in a hole, and the pluckier one will win." He left the capital with his army. He had gone only 30 li when he stopped. He threw up entrenchments. For 28 days he strengthened his fortifications. He made sure that spies would carry the intelligence to the enemy. The Qin general was overjoyed. He thought Chao Shi was afraid. He thought the relief force would never come. But the moment the spies had departed Chao, Shi began a forced march. It lasted 2 days and 1 night. He arrived on the scene of action with such astonishing rapidity that he occupied the commanding position on the North Hill before the enemy had got wind of his movements. A crushing defeat followed for the Qin forces. They raised the siege and retreated across the border. That is what Sun Tzu means by maneuvering. The art of being where the enemy does not expect you. The art of being there before he can react. Sun Tzu begins. In war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign. Having collected an army and concentrated his forces, he must blend and harmonize the different elements thereof before pitching his camp. After that comes tactical maneuvering, than which there is nothing more difficult. The difficulty of tactical maneuvering consists in turning the devious route into the direct one, and turning misfortune to gain. thus to take a long and circuitous route after enticing the enemy out of the way, and though starting after him to contrive to reach the goal before him, shows knowledge of the artifice of deviation. Maneuvering with the army is advantage. Maneuvering with a confused army is danger. If you set a fully equipped army in march in order to snatch an advantage, the chances are you will be too late. If you order your men to roll up their buff coats and march double pace for 100 li in order to wrest an advantage, the commanders of all 3 divisions will fall into the hands of the enemy. The stronger men will be in front, the jaded ones will fall behind, and on these calculations only 1/10 of your army will reach its destination. If you march 50 li in order to outmaneuver the enemy, the leader of your vanguard will probably fall into the hands of the enemy, and only half your army will reach its destination. If you march 30 li with the same object, 2/3 of your army will arrive. We may take it then that an army without its baggage train is lost. Without provisions, it is lost. Without bases of supply, it is lost. Sun Tzu is describing the brutal mathematics of the march. Every mile costs men. Every pace costs strength. The army that arrives first is fresh. The army that arrives last is beaten before it fights. We cannot enter into alliances until we are acquainted with the designs of our neighbors. We are not fit to lead an army on the march unless we are familiar with the face of the country, its mountains and forests, its hillocks and dangers, its defiles and swamps. We shall be unable to turn natural advantages to account unless we make use of local guides. In war, practice dissimulation, and you will succeed. Whether to concentrate or to divide your troops must be decided by circumstances. Let your rapidity be that of the wind, your compactness that of the forest. In raiding and plundering, be like fire. In immovability, like a mountain. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night. And when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. When you plunder a countryside, let the spoil be divided amongst your men. When you capture new territory, cut it up into allotments for the benefit of the soldiery. Ponder and deliberate before you make a move. He will conquer who has learnt the artifice of deviation. Such is the art of maneuvering. Sun Tzu then turns to the question of command and control. The Book of Army Management says, "On the field of battle, the spoken word does not carry far enough. Hence the institution of gongs and drums. Nor can ordinary objects be seen clearly enough. Hence the institution of banners and flags. Gongs and drums, banners and flags are means whereby the ears and eyes of the host may be focused on one particular point. The host thus forming a single united body, it is impossible either for the braver to advance alone or for the cowardly to retreat alone. This is the art of handling large masses of men. In night fighting, then, make much use of signal fires and drums, and in fighting by day of banners and flags, so as to influence the ears and eyes of your army. A whole army may be robbed of its spirit. A commander-in-chief may be robbed of his presence of mind. This is one of Sun Tzu's most famous observations. The army can lose its spirit. The general can lose his calm. Both can be stolen by the enemy. Now a soldier's spirit is keenest in the morning. By noonday it has begun to flag, and in the evening his mind is bent only on returning to camp. A clever general, therefore, avoids an army when its spirit is keen, but attacks it when it is sluggish and inclined to return. This is the art of studying moods. At the Battle of the Trebia, the Romans were foolishly allowed to fight fasting. Hannibal's men had breakfasted at their leisure. The Romans crossed the freezing river hungry and cold. They fought Hannibal's fresh and fed troops. They lost. That was the art of timing the spirit. Disciplined and calm to await the appearance of disorder and hubbub amongst the enemy. This is the art of retaining self-possession. To be near the goal while the enemy is still far from it. To wait at ease while the enemy is toiling and struggling. To be well fed while the enemy is famished. This is the art of husbanding one's strength. To refrain from intercepting an enemy whose banners are in perfect order. to refrain from attacking an army drawn up in calm and confident array. This is the art of studying circumstances. It is a military axiom not to advance uphill against the enemy, nor to oppose him when he comes downhill. Do not pursue an enemy who simulates flight. Do not attack soldiers whose temper is keen. Do not swallow a bait offered by the enemy. Do not interfere with an army that is returning home. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. This last point requires comment. It does not mean that the enemy is to be allowed to escape. The object is to make him believe that there is a road to safety, and thus prevent his fighting with the courage of despair. After that you may crush him. Birds and beasts, when brought to bay, will use their claws and teeth. A desperate foe is the most dangerous of all. If your adversary has burned his boats and destroyed his cooking pots, if he is ready to stake all on the issue of a battle, he must not be pushed to extremities. A story is told of Sun Tzu in 198 after Christ. He was besieging Changshu in Jiang. Liu Piao sent reinforcements to cut off Tzu's retreat. Tzu was hemmed in between two enemies in a narrow pass. In this desperate plight he waited until nightfall. He bored a tunnel into the mountainside. He laid an ambush in it. He marched on with his baggage train. When it grew light, Changshu found that the bird had flown. He pressed after him in hot pursuit. As soon as the whole army had passed by, the hidden troops fell on its rear. Tzu himself turned and met his pursuers in front. The pursuers were thrown into confusion and annihilated. Sun Tzu said afterwards, "The brigands tried to check my army in its retreat and brought me to battle in a desperate position. Hence I knew how to overcome them." That is the art of maneuvering. It is the art of arriving, the art of being there, the art of being fresh when the enemy is tired, the art of being calm when the enemy is confused, the art of being fed when the enemy is hungry, the art of being one step ahead. The army that maneuvers better than its enemy wins. The army that maneuvers worse loses. It is that simple, and it is that difficult. And in the next chapter we learn what to do when the plan goes wrong. We learn the art of varying tactics when the ground, the enemy, and the weather all refuse to cooperate. Chapter 8. Variation of Tactics. In the year 357 after Christ, a general named Yao Heixiang shut himself inside his walls. He was being opposed by Huang Mei and Teng Xiang. He refused to come out and fight. He thought he was safe behind his fortifications. Teng Xiang studied him for a while. Then he said to his colleagues, "Our adversary is of a choleric temper and easily provoked. Let us make constant sallies and break down his walls. Then he will grow angry and come out. Once we can bring his force to battle, it is doomed to be our prey." The plan was acted upon. Yao Xiang grew furious. He marched out to fight. He was lured on by the enemy's pretended flight. He was drawn as far as Sanyuan. There he was, attacked and slain. His anger killed him. That is what Sun Tzu warns against here. Sun Tzu begins. In war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign. He collects his army and concentrates his forces. When in difficult country, do not encamp. In country where high roads intersect, join hands with your allies. Do not linger in dangerously isolated positions. In situations, you must resort to stratagem. In a desperate position, you must fight. There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. That last is the hardest saying. It is the saying that defines the true general. The sovereign commands from a palace far from the field. He does not see the ground. He does not know the weather. He does not understand the enemy's position. His commands are based on reports that are days old. The general must obey his sovereign in peace. In war, he must obey the situation. If the sovereign commands him to encamp in difficult country, the general must refuse. If the sovereign commands him to attack a strong position, the general must refuse. If the sovereign commands him to besiege a town that cannot be taken, the general must refuse. The general who obeys a foolish command is a fool. The general who disobeys a foolish command is a general. Sun Tzu, the warlord, who later became emperor, gives an example from his own experience. When invading the territory of Suzhou, he ignored the city of Huapi. Huapi lay directly in his path. A lesser general would have besieged it. Sun Tzu pressed on into the heart of the country. This excellent strategy was rewarded by the subsequent capture of no fewer than 14 important district cities. He did not waste his army on one town. He used it to take 14. Turenne, the great French marshal, said it is a great mistake to waste men in taking a town when the same expenditure of soldiers will gain a province. The general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics knows how to handle his troops. The general who does not understand these may be well acquainted with the configuration of the country. Yet he will not be able to turn his knowledge to practical account. So, the student of war who is unversed in the art of varying his plans, even though he be acquainted with the 5 advantages, will fail to make the best use of his men. Hence, in the wise leader's plans, considerations of advantage and of disadvantage will be blended together. If our expectation of advantage be tempered in this way, we may succeed in accomplishing the essential part of our schemes. If, on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties, we are always ready to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune. This is the principle of balance. When you see an advantage, do not rush at it. Consider what harm might come with it. When you face a difficulty, do not despair. Consider what advantage might be hidden in it. The general who thinks only of the advantage is lured into traps. The general who thinks only of the disadvantage is paralyzed by fear. The general who holds both in mind can move, reduce the hostile chiefs by inflicting damage on them, make trouble for them, keep them constantly engaged, hold out specious allurements, and make them rush to any given point. The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him, not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable. This is one of the deepest principles in the book. You do not control the enemy, you control yourself. You do not hope the enemy will not come. You prepare for his coming. You do not hope he will not attack. You make yourself impossible to attack. The enemy's choices are his. Your preparations are yours. Hope is not a strategy. Readiness is. Sun Tzu now turns to the 5 dangerous faults of a general. There are 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. Recklessness, which leads to destruction. Cowardice, which leads to capture. A hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. A delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. Over-solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble. These are the 5 besetting sins of a general ruinous to the conduct of war. When an army is overthrown and its leader slain, the cause will surely be found among these 5 dangerous faults. Let them be a subject of meditation. Consider each one. Recklessness. The brave man who fights without thought. He is a danger to himself and his army. He can be lured into an ambush. He can be drawn onto bad ground. He can be provoked into attacking a stronger force. His bravery is real, but his bravery is also his doom. Cowardice. The man who will not take a risk. He is the opposite of the reckless man, but no less dangerous. He loses opportunities. He fails to attack when he should. He retreats when he should stand. His army loses heart. Nothing is achieved in war unless you are willing to take risks. A hasty temper. This is what killed Yao Xiang. The enemy provoked him. He came out of his walls. He died. A general who cannot control his temper can be controlled by his enemy. The enemy will find what makes him angry. The enemy will use it. The enemy will bait him. And he will take the bait because his temper will not let him refuse. A delicacy of honor. This is the man who cannot bear an insult. He cannot bear slander. He cannot bear to be called a coward. He will fight to defend his reputation, even when fighting is wrong. He will attack to silence a critic, even when attacking is foolish. His pride is more important to him than victory. He will lose the war to win an argument. Over-solicitude for his men. This is the most subtle of the five. It looks like a virtue. It is a vice. The general who cannot bear to see his men tired will not march them far enough. The general who cannot bear to see his men hungry will not push them through hard country. The general who cannot bear to see his men die will not risk them in the battle that must be fought at. His pity destroys his army. His pity prolongs the war. His pity causes more suffering than his cruelty ever would. In the end, his men will suffer more from the defeat his pity caused than they would have suffered from the march his pity prevented. These are the five faults. They destroy armies. They kill generals. They lose kingdoms. The general who knows them can guard against them. The general who does not know them is already infected. That is the lesson of this chapter. The art of war is not only about what to do. It is also about what not to do. It is about what to refuse, what to disobey, what to avoid. The general who knows only his plan is half a general. The general who knows his own faults is whole. And in the next chapter, we leave the general's mind and walk onto the field. We learn how to read the enemy from the signs he leaves behind, the dust of his march, the flight of his birds, the silence of his camp. Chapter 9. The army on the mark in 204 before Christ. Han Hoxin marched to attack the army of Lung Chu. The two armies faced each other across the Wei River. In the night, Han Xin ordered his men to take some 10,000 sacks filled with sand. They constructed a dam a little higher up the river. Then, leading half his army across, Han Xin attacked Lung Chu. After a time he pretended to have failed. He hastily withdrew to the other bank. Lung Chu was much elated. He exclaimed, "I felt sure that Han Xin was really a coward." He pursued Han Xin. He began crossing the river in his turn. Han Xin sent a party to cut open the sandbags. A great volume of water was released. It swept down and prevented the greater portion of Lung Chu's army from getting across. Han Xin turned upon the force that had been cut off. He annihilated it. Lung Chu himself was among the slain. The rest of the army scattered and fled. That is the art of war Sun Tzu teaches here. The art of reading the field, the art of using the ground and the water and the wind as weapons. Sun Tzu begins with the question of encampment. We come now to the question of encamping the army and observing signs of the enemy. Pass quickly over mountains and keep in the neighborhood of valleys. Camp in high places facing the sun. Do not climb heights in order to fight. So much for mountain warfare. After crossing a river, you should get far away from it. When an invading force crosses a river in its onward march, do not advance to meet it in midstream. It will be best to let half the army get across and then deliver your attack. If you are anxious to fight, you should not go to meet the invader near a river which he has to cross. Moor your craft higher up than the enemy and facing the sun. Do not move upstream to meet the enemy. So much for river warfare. In crossing salt marshes, your sole concern should be to get over them quickly without any delay. If forced to fight in a salt marsh, you should have water and grass near you, and get your back to a clump of trees. So much for operations in salt marshes. In dry level country, take up an easily accessible position, with rising ground to your right and on your rear, so that the danger may be in front and safety lie behind. So much for campaigning in flat country. These are the 4 useful branches of military knowledge which enabled the Yellow Emperor to vanquish 4 several sovereigns. All armies prefer high ground to low, sunshine to shadow, and shelter from the cold. When you come to a hill or bank, occupy the sunny side with the slope on your right rear. These are precepts of tactical disposition. When heavy rain rises in a higher stretch of country, look for flood. Country in which there are precipitous cliffs, torrents, hollows, confined places, tangles of thorns, and crevasses, Leave such places at the utmost speed, avoid them from afar. For they are positions where men in ambush or insidious spies are likely to be lurking. Now Sun Tzu turns to the heart of the chapter, the reading of signs. When the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, he is relying on the natural strength of his position. When he keeps aloof and tries to provoke a battle, he is anxious for the other side to advance. If the place of encampment is easy of access, he is tendering a bait. Movement amongst the trees of a forest shows that the enemy is advancing. The appearance of a number of screens in the midst of thick grass means that the enemy wants to make us suspicious. The rising of birds in their flight is the sign of an ambuscade. Startled beasts indicate that a sudden attack is coming. When there is dust rising in a high column, it is the sign of chariots advancing. When the dust is low, but spread over a wide area, it betokens the approach of infantry. When it branches out in different directions, it shows that parties have been sent to collect firewood. A few clouds of dust moving to and fro signify that the army is encamping. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to the attack are signs that he will retreat. When the light chariots come out first and take up a position on the wings, it is a sign that the enemy is forming for battle. Peace proposals unaccompanied by a sworn covenant indicate a plot. When there is much running about and the soldiers fall into rank, it means that the critical moment has come. When some are seen advancing and some retreating, it is a lure. When the soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. If those who are sent to draw water begin by drinking themselves, the army is suffering from thirst. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. If birds gather on any spot, it is unoccupied. Clamor by night betokens nervousness. If there is disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banners and flags are shifted about, sedition is afoot. If the officers are angry, it means that the men are weary. When an army feeds its horses with grain and kills its cattle for food. And when the men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfires, showing that they will not return to their tents. You may know that they are determined to fight to the death. The sight of men whispering together in small knots or speaking in subdued tones points to disaffection amongst the rank and file. Too frequent rewards signify that the enemy is at the end of his resources. Too many punishments betray a condition of dire distress. To begin by bluster, but afterwards to take fright at the enemy's numbers, shows a supreme lack of intelligence. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. If the enemy's troops march up angrily and remain facing ours for a long time, without either joining battle or taking themselves off again, the situation is one that demands great vigilance and circumspection. This is the art of scouting. It is the art of reading the enemy without speaking to him. Every camp tells a story. Every movement tells a story. Every silence tells a story. The general who can read these stories knows what the enemy will do before the enemy does it. In 279 before Christ, Tian Tan of Qi was hard-pressed in his defense of Qimo against the Yan forces led by Qi. Tian Tan spoke openly. My only fear is that the Yan army may cut off the noses of their Qi prisoners and place them in the front rank to fight against us. That would be the undoing of our city. The enemy heard of this speech. They acted on the suggestion. They cut off the noses of the prisoners. The defenders of Qimo were enraged. They feared they would fall into enemy hands. They fought more obstinately than ever. Tian Tan sent more converted spies. They reported that what he dreaded most was that the men of Yen might dig up the ancestral tombs outside the town. Forthwith the besiegers dug up all the graves and burned the corpses. The inhabitants of Qimo wept passionately. They were impatient to go out and fight. Their fury increased tenfold. Tian Tan knew then that his soldiers were ready for any enterprise. He himself took a mattock in his hands. He ordered others to be distributed amongst his best warriors. The ranks were filled up with their wives and concubines. He served out all the remaining rations. He bade his men eat their fill. The regular soldiers were told to keep out of sight. The walls were manned with the old and weaker men and with women. Envoys were dispatched to arrange terms of surrender. The Yen army began shouting for joy. Tien Tan collected 20,000 ounces of silver from the people. He got the wealthy citizens to send it to the Yen general with the prayer that their homes would not be plundered. The Yen general granted their prayer. His army became slack and careless. Then Tien Tan got together 1,000 oxen. He decked them with pieces of red silk. He painted their bodies dragon-like with colored stripes. He fastened sharp blades on their horns. He fastened well-greased rushes on their tails. When night came on, he lighted the ends of the rushes. He drove the oxen through holes he had pierced in the walls. He backed them up with a force of 5,000 picked warriors. The animals, maddened with pain, dashed furiously into the enemy's camp. They caused the utmost confusion and dismay. The band of 5,000 had crept up with gags in their mouths. They threw themselves on the enemy. A frightful din arose in the city itself. Those that remained behind banged drums and hammered on bronze vessels. Heaven and earth were convulsed by the uproar. The Yen army fled in disorder. They were hotly pursued. Their general, Chi Chia, was slain. The result of the battle was the ultimate recovery of some 70 cities which had belonged to the Qi state. That is what a commander can do when he reads his own army's spirit, and reads the enemy's carelessness. Sun Tzu closes the chapter with discipline. If our troops are no more in number than the enemy, that is amply sufficient. He who exercises no forethought, but makes light of his opponents, is sure to be captured by them. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive. Unless submissive, they will be practically useless. If when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be useless. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by means of iron discipline. This is a certain road to victory. If, in training soldiers, commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. If a general shows confidence in his men but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. That is the chapter. It is the chapter of the march, the chapter of the camp, the chapter of the sign. The general who can read the signs and read his own army will win. The general who cannot will lose. And in the next chapter we learn the ground itself. We learn the 6 kinds of terrain, and the 6 calamities that destroy armies. Chapter 10. Terrain. In the year 621, after Christ, the general Pei Xingqian was sent on a punitive expedition against the Turkic tribes. At nightfall he pitched his camp as usual. The walls were built. The ditches were dug. The camp was complete. Then suddenly he gave orders that the army should shift its quarters to a hill nearby. His officers protested loudly. The men were tired. The work was done. Why move? Pei Xingqian paid no heed. He had the camp moved as quickly as possible. That night a terrific storm came on. It flooded their former place of encampment to the depth of over 12 feet. The recalcitrant officers were amazed. They asked, "How did you know what was going to happen?" Pei Xingqian replied, "From this time forward be content to obey orders without asking unnecessary questions." That is the art of terrain. The general who reads the ground reads the future. Sun Tzu begins this chapter by classifying the ground. We may distinguish 6 kinds of terrain: accessible ground, entangling ground, temporizing ground, narrow passes, precipitous heights, positions at a great distance from the enemy. Ground which can be freely traversed by both sides is called accessible. With regard to ground of this nature, be before the enemy in occupying the raised and sunny spots, and carefully guard your line of supplies. Then you will be able to fight with advantage. Ground which can be abandoned but is hard to reoccupy is called entangling. From a position of this sort, if the enemy is unprepared, you may sally forth and defeat him. But if the enemy is prepared for your coming and you fail to defeat him, then return being impossible, disaster will ensue. When the position is such that neither side will gain by making the first move, it is called temporizing ground. In a position of this sort, even though the enemy should offer us an attractive bait, it will be advisable not to stir forth but rather to retreat, thus enticing the enemy in his turn. Then, when part of his army has come out, we may deliver our attack with advantage. With regard to narrow passes, if you can occupy them first, let them be strongly garrisoned and await the advent of the enemy. Should the enemy forestall you in occupying a pass, do not go after him if the pass is fully garrisoned, but only if it is weakly garrisoned. With regard to precipitous heights, if you are beforehand with your adversary, you should occupy the raised and sunny spots, and there wait for him to come up. If the enemy has occupied them before you, do not follow him, but retreat and try to entice him away. If you are situated at a great distance from the enemy and the strength of the two armies is equal, it is not easy to provoke a battle, and fighting will be to your disadvantage. These 6 are the principles connected with earth. The general who has attained a responsible post must be careful to study them. The story of Li Shishmin in 621 after Christ illustrates the principle. He was campaigning against 2 rebels, To Xiant, king of Heixia, and Wang Shicheng, prince of Cheng. The turning point of the campaign was his seizure of the heights of Wulao. Tu Qiante persisted in his attempt to relieve his ally in Luoyang. He was defeated and taken prisoner. He had violated the principle of terrain. He had attacked a stronger position from a weaker one. He had marched when he should have waited. He lost his kingdom. Sun Tzu now turns to the 6 calamities. These are not natural disasters. They are the faults of the general. Now an army is exposed to 6 several calamities, not arising from natural causes, but from faults for which the general is responsible. These are flight, insubordination, collapse, ruin, disorganization, rout. Other conditions being equal, if one force is hurled against another 10 times its size, the result will be the flight of the former. When the common soldiers are too strong and their officers too weak, the result is insubordination. When the officers are too strong and the common soldiers too weak, the result is collapse. When the higher officers are angry and insubordinate, and on meeting the enemy give battle on their own account from a feeling of resentment, before the commander-in-chief can tell whether or no he is in a position to fight, the result is ruin. When the general is weak and without authority, when his orders are not clear and distinct, when there are no fixed duties assigned to officers and men, and the ranks are formed in a slovenly, haphazard manner, the result is utter disorganization. When a general unable to estimate the enemy's strength allows an inferior force to engage a larger one, or hurls a weak detachment against a powerful one, and neglects to place picked soldiers in the front rank, the result must be a rout. These are 6 ways of courting defeat which must be carefully noted by the general who has attained a responsible post. The natural formation of the country is the soldier's best ally. But a power of estimating the adversary, of controlling the forces of victory, and of shrewdly calculating difficulties, dangers, and distances, constitutes the test of a great general. He who knows these things, and in fighting puts his knowledge into practice, will win his battles. He who knows them not, nor practices them, will surely be defeated. If fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight even though the ruler forbid it. If fighting will not result in victory, then you must not fight, even at the ruler's bidding. This is the 2nd time Sun Tzu tells us we may disobey the sovereign. The first was in the chapter on variation of tactics. Here he repeats it. The general who fights because the sovereign commands him to fight will lose. The general who fights because the situation commands him to fight will win. the general who advances without coveting fame and retreats without fearing disgrace, whose only thought is to protect his country and do good service for his sovereign, is the jewel of the kingdom. This is the portrait of the Chinese happy warrior. He does not fight for glory. He does not fight for advancement. He fights for the country. He fights for the sovereign. He fights for the men under his command. Nothing else matters. Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look on them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. A story is told of the famous General Wu Qi. He wore the same clothes and ate the same food as the meanest of his soldiers. He refused to have either a horse to ride or a mat to sleep on. He carried his own surplus rations wrapped in a parcel. He shared every hardship with his men. One of his soldiers was suffering from an abscess. Wu Qi himself sucked out the virus. The soldier's mother, hearing this, began wailing and lamenting. Somebody asked her, "Why do you cry? Your son is only a common soldier, and yet the commander-in-chief himself has sucked the poison from his sore." The woman replied, "Many years ago, Lord Wu performed a similar service for my husband, who never left him afterwards and finally met his death at the hands of the enemy. And now that he has done the same for my son, he too will fall fighting, I know not where." That is the bond between general and soldier. It is not given, it is earned. But Sun Tzu warns, if, however, you are indulgent but unable to make your authority felt, kind-hearted but unable to enforce your commands, and incapable, moreover, of quelling disorder, then your soldiers must be likened to spoilt children. They are useless for any practical purpose. Love without discipline is weakness. Discipline without love is tyranny. The good general has both. A story is told of Lu Meng in 219 after Christ. He had given stringent orders to his army not to molest the inhabitants, nor take anything from them by force. An officer serving under his banner ventured to appropriate a bamboo hat belonging to one of the people. He wore it over his regulation helmet as a protection against the rain. Lu Meng considered that the fact of his being also a fellow townsman should not be allowed to palliate a clear breach of discipline. He ordered his summary execution. The tears rolled down his face as he did so. This act of severity filled the army with wholesome awe. From that time forth, even articles dropped in the highway were not picked up. That is the balance. Lu Meng loved his men enough to weep for them, but he executed the offender anyway. He knew that discipline saved more lives than leniency ever did. Sun Tzu closes the chapter. If we know that our own men are in a condition to attack, but are unaware that the enemy is not open to attack, we have gone only halfway towards victory. If we know that the enemy is open to attack, but are unaware that our own men are not in a condition to attack, we have gone only halfway towards victory. If we know that the enemy is open to attack, and also know that our men are in a condition to attack, but are unaware that the nature of the ground makes fighting impracticable, we have still gone only halfway towards victory. Hence the experienced soldier, once in motion, is never bewildered. Once he has broken camp, he is never at a loss. Hence the saying, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, your victory will not stand in doubt." If you know heaven and know earth, you may make your victory complete. 3 forms of knowledge: know the enemy, know yourself, know the ground and the sky. Miss anyone, and you fight at half strength. Have all 3, and your victory is complete. That is the art of terrain, the art of reading the field before you, the art of reading your own army, the art of reading the enemy across the way. And in the next chapter we learn the deepest terrain of all, the terrain inside the soldier's mind. We learn the 9 situations that an army can be placed in, and what each one demands of the men who must fight there. Chapter 11. The 9 Situations. In the year 227 before Christ, an assassin named Qin Ko stood on the bank of the Ai River. He was about to set out to kill the king of Qin. He knew he would not return. His friends stood around him. The wind was cold. The water was chill. He sang a song that has been remembered for 2,000 years. The shrill blast is blowing, chilly the burn. Your champion is going, not to return. The tears of his friends flowed down like rain. He walked away. He did not come back. That is the spirit Sun Tzu speaks of here. The spirit of the soldier who knows he must die and goes anyway. Sun Tzu begins. The art of war recognizes 9 varieties of ground. When a chieftain is fighting in his own territory, it is dispersive ground. When he has penetrated into hostile territory, but to no great distance, it is facile ground. Ground the possession of which imports great advantage to either side is contentious ground. Ground on which each side has liberty of movement is open ground. Ground which forms the key to 3 contiguous states, so that he who occupies it first has most of the empire under his sway, is ground of intersecting highways. When an army has penetrated into the heart of a hostile country, leaving a number of fortified cities in its rear, it is serious ground. Mountain forests, rugged steeps, marshes, and fens, all country that is hard to traverse, is difficult ground. Ground which is reached through narrow gorges, and from which we can only retire by tortuous paths, so that a small number of the enemy would suffice to crush a large body of our men, is hemmed in ground. Ground on which we can only be saved from destruction by fighting without delay is desperate ground. Sun Tzu then gives the rule for each. On dispersive ground fight not. On facile ground halt not. On contentious ground attack not. On open ground do not try to block the enemy's way. On ground of intersecting highways join hands with your allies. On serious ground gather in plunder. In difficult ground keep steadily on the march. On hemmed in ground resort to stratagem. On desperate ground fight. That is the rule. Each ground demands a different response. The general who treats all ground the same will lose on all ground. The general who reads each ground and responds to it will win. Those who were called skillful leaders of old knew how to drive a wedge between the enemy's front and rear. They prevented cooperation between his large and small divisions. They hindered the good troops from rescuing the bad, the officers from rallying their men. When the enemy's men were scattered, they prevented them from concentrating themselves. When it was to their advantage, they made a forward move. When otherwise, they stopped still. If asked how to cope with a great host of the enemy in orderly array about to march, I should say begin by seizing something which your opponent holds dear. Then he will be amenable to your will. Rapidity is the essence of war. Take advantage of the enemy's unreadiness. Make your way by unexpected routes, and attack unguarded spots. The story is told of Sima I in 227 after Christ. He was military governor of Wan. He got wind that Meng Da, the governor of Xincheng, was meditating defection. Meng Da had entered into correspondence with Chu Liang, the prime minister of Shu. Sima I's officers said if Meng Da has leagued himself with Wu and Shu, the matter should be thoroughly investigated before we make a move. Sima I replied, Meng Da is an unprincipled man. We ought to go and punish him at once, while he is still wavering and before he is thrown off the mask. By a series of forced marches, he brought his army under the walls of Xincheng within the space of 8 days. Meng Da had written to Chu Liang that Wan was 1,200 li from Xincheng, that it would be a whole month before any steps could be taken. Sima I was sure not to come himself. The next letter was filled with consternation. Though only 8 days have passed since I threw off my allegiance, an army is already at the city gates. What miraculous rapidity is this? A fortnight later, Xincheng had fallen, and Meng Da had lost his head. That is what rapidity means. It means the enemy does not have time to react. It means the enemy's plans are obsolete before they are executed. In 621, after Christ, Li Qing was sent to reduce the rebel Heshao Hessian. It was autumn. The Yangtze was in flood. Heshao Hessian never dreamt his adversary would venture to come down through the gorges. He made no preparations. Li Qing's officers implored him to postpone his departure until the river was in a less dangerous state for navigation. Li Qing replied to the soldier, "Overwhelming speed is of paramount importance. He must never miss opportunities. Now is the time to strike before Hishao Hissien even knows that we have got an army together. If we seize the present moment when the river is in flood, we shall appear before his capital with startling suddenness, like the thunder which is heard before you have time to stop your ears against it. Even if he gets to know of our approach, he will have to levy his soldiers in such a hurry that they will not be fit to oppose us. Thus the full fruits of victory will be ours." All came about as he predicted. Xiao Xian was obliged to surrender. Sun Tzu continues, "The following are the principles to be observed by an invading force. The further you penetrate into a country, the greater will be the solidarity of your troops, and thus the defenders will not prevail against you. Make forays in fertile country in order to supply your army with food. Carefully study the well-being of your men, and do not overtax them. Concentrate your energy and hoard your strength. Keep your army continually on the move, and devise unfathomable plans. Throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they will face death, there is nothing they may not achieve. Officers and men alike will put forth their uttermost efforts. Soldiers, when in desperate straits, lose the sense of fear. If there is no help for it, they will fight hard. Thus, without waiting to be marshaled, the soldiers will be constantly obedient. Without waiting to be asked, they will do your will. Without orders, they will be faithful. Prohibit the taking of omens, and do away with superstitious doubts. Then until death itself comes, no calamity need be feared. If our soldiers are not overburdened with money, it is not because they have a distaste for wealth. If their lives are not long, it is not because they are disinclined to longevity. On the day they are ordered out to battle, your soldiers may weep, those sitting up bedewing their garments, and those lying down letting the tears run down their cheeks. But let them once be brought to bay, and they will display the courage of a Chu or a Kuei. The skillful tactician may be likened to the Shui Jan. Now the Shui Jan is a snake that is found in the Chang Mountains. Strike at its head, and you will be attacked by its tail. Strike at its tail, and you will be attacked by its head. Strike at its middle, and you will be attacked by head and tail both. Asked if an army can be made to imitate the Shui Jan, I should answer yes. For the men of Wu and the men of Yue are enemies. Yet if they are crossing a river in the same boat and are caught by a storm, they will come to each other's assistance just as the left hand helps the right. Hence it is not enough to put one's trust in the tethering of horses and the burying of chariot wheels in the ground. The principle on which to manage an army is to set up one standard of courage which all must reach. How to make the best of both strong and weak, that is a question involving the proper use of ground. Thus the skillful general conducts his army just as though he were leading a single man willy-nilly by the hand. It is the business of a general to be quiet, and thus ensure secrecy, upright and just, and thus maintain order. He must be able to mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance. By altering his arrangements and changing his plans, he keeps the enemy without definite knowledge. By shifting his camp and taking circuitous routes, he prevents the enemy from anticipating his purpose. At the critical moment, the leader of an army acts like one who has climbed up a height and then kicks away the ladder behind him. He carries his men deep into hostile territory before he shows his hand. He burns his boats and breaks his cooking pots. Like a shepherd driving a flock of sheep, he drives his men this way and that, and no one knows where he is going. To muster the host and bring it into danger, this may be termed the business of a general. Sun Tzu then returns to the 9 grounds and what should be done on each. On dispersive ground, I would inspire my men with unity of purpose. On facile ground, I would see that there is close connection between divisions. On contentious ground, I would hurry up my rear. On open ground, I would keep a vigilant eye on my defenses. On ground of intersecting highways, I would consolidate my alliances. On serious ground, I would try to ensure a continuous stream of supplies. On difficult ground, I would keep pushing on along the road. On hemmed-in ground, I would block any way of retreat. On desperate ground, I would proclaim to my soldiers the hopelessness of saving their lives. For it is the soldier's disposition to offer an obstinate resistance when surrounded, to fight hard when he cannot help himself, and to obey promptly when he has fallen into danger. We cannot enter into alliance with neighboring princes until we are acquainted with their designs. We cannot turn natural advantages to account unless we make use of local guides. To be ignorant of any one of the following 4 or 5 principles does not befit a warlike prince. When a warlike prince attacks a powerful state, his generalship shows itself in preventing the concentration of the enemy's forces. He overawes his opponents, and their allies are prevented from joining against him. Hence he does not strive to ally himself with all and sundry, nor does he foster the power of other states. He carries out his own secret designs, keeping his antagonists in awe. Thus he is able to capture their cities and overthrow their kingdoms, bestow rewards without regard to rule, issue orders without regard to previous arrangements. And you will be able to handle a whole army as though you had to do with but a single man. Confront your soldiers with the deed itself. Never let them know your design. When the outlook is bright, bring it before their eyes. But tell them nothing when the situation is gloomy. Place your army in deadly peril, and it will survive. Plunge it into desperate straits, and it will come off in safety. For it is precisely when fortune is at her darkest that the light of hope can be seen. The story is told of Han Ho-sin in 204 before Christ. He was sent against the army of Chow. He halted 10 miles from the mouth of the Ching Sing Pass, where the enemy had mustered in full force. At midnight, he detached a body of 2,000 light cavalry. Every man was furnished with a red flag. Their instructions were to make their way through narrow defiles and keep a secret watch on the enemy. Han Ho-sin said, "When the men of Chow see me in full flight, they will abandon their fortifications and give chase. This must be the sign for you to rush in, pluck down the Chow standards, and set up the red banners of Han in their stead." He then sent out a division of 10,000 men. He ordered them to form in line of battle with their backs to the river Ti. Seeing this maneuver, the whole army of Chow broke into loud laughter. They thought he was a fool to put his own back against a river. Han Ho-sin marched out of the pass with drums beating. He was immediately engaged by the enemy. A great battle followed. After some time, Han Ho-sin and his colleague fled to the division on the riverbank. The enemy rushed out to pursue them. They thus denuded their ramparts of men. The 2,000 horsemen galloped behind the deserted walls. They tore up the enemy's flags and replaced them by those of Han. When the Chow army turned back from the pursuit, the sight of these red flags struck them with terror. Convinced that the Hans had got in and overpowered their king, they broke up in wild disorder. Then the Han army fell on them from both sides and completed the rout. After the battle, some of Han Ho-sin's officers asked him, "How did you manage to gain the victory?" "You ordered us to draw up our troops with the river at our back." Han Ho-sin replied, "I fear you gentlemen have not studied the art of war with sufficient care. Is it not written there, 'Plunge your army into desperate straits, and it will come off in safety. Place it in deadly peril, and it will survive.' Had I taken the usual course, I should never have been able to bring my colleagues round. That is the principle. Men fight hardest when they cannot retreat. Men obey best when they have no other choice. Men die willingly when they know death is certain either way. The general who places his men in such a position does not destroy them. He saves them. He gives them the only thing that can make them fight as one: the certainty that they must. That is the power of the 9 situations, the art of placing your men where the ground itself forces them to be brave, and in the next chapter we leave the open field and turn to fire. We learn the 5 ways of attacking with fire, and we learn the most terrible warning in the book, that a kingdom once destroyed can never come again into being. Chapter 12. The Attack by Fire. In the 1st century after Christ, a Chinese envoy named Pan Chao was sent on a diplomatic mission to the king of Shanshan. He arrived at the king's court with a small band of men. He was treated with great honor. Then a Xiongnu envoy arrived with a much larger retinue. The king of Shanshan began to waver. He began to favor the barbarians. Pan Chao knew his mission was about to fail. He knew his own life was in danger. He called his officers together. He said, "Never venture, never win. The only course open to us now is to make an assault by fire on the barbarians under cover of night, when they will not be able to discern our numbers. Profiting by their panic, we shall exterminate them completely. This will cool the king's courage and cover us with glory, besides ensuring the success of our mission." The officers replied that it would be necessary to discuss the matter first with the intendant. Pan Chao fell into a passion. "It is today," he cried, "that our fortunes must be decided. The intendant is only a humdrum civilian, who on hearing of our project will certainly be afraid, and everything will be brought to light. An inglorious death is no worthy fate for valiant warriors." All agreed to do as he wished. As soon as night came on, he and his little band quickly made their way to the barbarian camp. A strong gale was blowing at the time. Pan Chao ordered 10 of the party to take drums and hide behind the enemy's barracks. It was arranged that when they saw flames shoot up, they should begin drumming and yelling with all their might. The rest of his men, armed with bows and crossbows, he posted in ambuscade at the gate of the camp. He then set fire to the place from the windward side. A deafening noise of drums and shouting arose on the front and rear of the Xiongnu. They rushed out pell-mell in frantic disorder. Pan Chao slew 3 of them with his own hand. His companions cut off the heads of the envoy and 30 of his suite. The remainder, more than 100 in all, perished in the flames. The next day the king of Shanshan was shown the head of the barbarian envoy. The whole kingdom was seized with fear and trembling. Pan Chao took the king's son as hostage. He returned to make his report. That is what fire can do. A handful of men can destroy 100, if they have the wind, if they have the night, if they have the will. Sun Tzu begins, "There are 5 ways of attacking with fire. The first is to burn soldiers in their camp. The second is to burn stores. The third is to burn baggage trains. The fourth is to burn arsenals and magazines. The fifth is to hurl dropping fire amongst the enemy. In order to carry out an attack with fire, we must have means available. The material for raising fire should always be kept in readiness. There is a proper season for making attacks with fire, and special days for starting a conflagration. The proper season is when the weather is very dry. The special days are those when the moon is in the constellations of the sieve, the wall, the wing, or the crossbar. For these 4 are all days of rising wind. In attacking with fire, one should be prepared to meet 5 possible developments. When fire breaks out inside the enemy's camp, respond at once with an attack from without. If there is an outbreak of fire, but the enemy's soldiers remain quiet, bide your time and do not attack. When the force of the flames has reached its height, follow it up with an attack, if that is practicable. If not, stay where you are. If it is possible to make an assault with fire from without, do not wait for it to break out within, but deliver your attack at a favorable moment. When you start a fire, be to windward of it. Do not attack from the leeward. A wind that rises in the daytime lasts long, but a night breeze soon falls. In every army, the 5 developments connected with fire must be known. The movements of the stars calculated, and a watch kept for the proper days. Hence, those who use fire as an aid to the attack show intelligence. Those who use water as an aid to the attack gain an accession of strength. By means of water, an enemy may be intercepted. but not robbed of all his belongings. Water can do useful service, but it lacks the terrible destructive power of fire. That is why the former is dismissed in a couple of sentences, whereas the attack by fire is discussed in detail. A story is told of Li Ling. He was baffling the leader of the Haichung-nu. The barbarian took advantage of a favorable wind. He tried to set fire to the Chinese general's camp, but he found that every scrap of combustible vegetation in the neighborhood had already been burnt down. Li Ling had seen the danger first. He had burned the grass before the enemy could use it. That is the precaution. The general who camps in dry grass must burn the grass around his camp himself. He must not wait for the enemy to do it for him. In 184 after Christ, a general named Posai was besieging the city of Changshe. He had a large army. The garrison was very small. A general feeling of nervousness pervaded the ranks of the defenders. The commander Huang Fu Sung called his officers together. He said, in war, there are various indirect methods of attack and numbers do not count for everything. Now the rebels have pitched their camp in the midst of thick grass, which will easily burn when the wind blows. If we set fire to it at night, they will be thrown into a panic, and we can make a sortie and attack them on all sides at once. That same evening a strong breeze sprang up. Huang Fu Sung instructed his soldiers to bind reeds together into torches. He sent out a band of daring men. They stealthily made their way through the lines. They started the fire with loud shouts and yells. Simultaneously, a glare of light shot up from the city walls. Huang Fu Sung, sounding his drums, led a rapid charge. The rebels were thrown into confusion. They were put to headlong flight. That is the art of fire. The general who camps in combustible ground invites his own destruction. The general who sees the combustible ground and lights it first wins the battle. Sun Tzu now turns from fire to something more important. He turns to the mind of the ruler. Unhappy is the fate of one who tries to win his battles and succeed in his attacks without cultivating the spirit of enterprise. For the result is waste of time and general stagnation. Hence the saying, the enlightened ruler lays his plans well ahead. The good general cultivates his resources. Move not unless you see an advantage. Use not your troops unless there is something to be gained. Fight not unless the position is critical. No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight a battle simply out of pique. If it is to your advantage, make a forward move. If not, stay where you are. Anger may in time change to gladness. Vexation may be succeeded by content. But a kingdom that has once been destroyed can never come again into being. Nor can the dead ever be brought back to life. Hence the enlightened ruler is heedful, and the good general full of caution. This is the way to keep a country at peace and an army intact. This is the most solemn passage in the entire book. It is the passage that lifts Sun Tzu above the level of a tactician. He is not just teaching how to fight, he is teaching when not to fight. He is teaching the sovereign that his anger is not a sufficient reason for war. He is teaching the general that his pride is not a sufficient reason for battle. Anger passes, pride fades, but the dead remain dead. The destroyed kingdom remains destroyed. The general who fights from anger will return to find his anger gone, but the dead will still be dead. The general who fights from pride will return to find his pride cooled, but the destroyed kingdom will still be destroyed. These are not reversible. These are not things that can be undone. The enlightened ruler is heedful. The good general is full of caution. They do not fight because they can. They fight because they must. They do not fight because they want to. They fight because there is no other choice. And when the fight is over, they do not celebrate. They count the cost. They count the dead. They wonder if it was necessary. If they are honest, they often conclude it was not. That is the burden of command. That is the weight Sun Tzu places on the shoulders of every general who reads his book. War is not a game. War is not a sport. War is the matter of life and death for the state. It must be undertaken only when the state's survival depends on it. It must be undertaken only with full knowledge of what it will cost. It must be undertaken only with the determination to finish it as quickly as possible. That is the lesson of this chapter. The fire that burns the enemy's camp can also burn your own. The anger that drives you to battle can also drive you to ruin. The pride that makes you refuse to retreat can also make you unable to advance. Be careful, be cautious, be slow to fight, be quick to finish. That is the way to keep a country at peace and an army intact. And in the next chapter we come to the last and most secret weapon of all. We come to the spy, the one who can win the war before it begins. The one whose name no one will ever know. Chapter 13. The Use of Spies. In the 18th century before Christ, a man named I-Chish served under the Hsia dynasty. He saw the corruption of the king. He saw the suffering of the people. He left Hsia. He went to serve Chung Tong, the founder of the Yin dynasty. He brought with him the knowledge of Hsia's weaknesses. He brought with him the knowledge of Hsia's armies. He brought with him the knowledge of Hsia's plans. Chung Tong used that knowledge. He overthrew Hsia. He founded a new dynasty. Centuries later, a man named Liu Ya served under the Yin dynasty. He saw the tyranny of the king. He saw the suffering of the people. He left Yin. He went to serve Wen Wang, the founder of the Chu dynasty. He brought with him the knowledge of Yin's weaknesses. He brought with him the knowledge of Yin's armies. He brought with him the knowledge of Yin's plans. Wen Wang used that knowledge. He overthrew Yin. He founded a new dynasty. These are the two examples Sun Tzu gives at the end of his book. Two men who brought down kingdoms, not by leading armies, not by fighting battles, but by carrying secrets from one master to another. Sun Tzu begins this final chapter with a calculation. Raising a host of 100,000 men and marching them great distances entails heavy loss on the people, and a drain on the resources of the state. The daily expenditure will amount to 1,000 ounces of silver. Contributions from all sides will be forthcoming. The commissariat will be strained to the utmost, and 700,000 families will be unable to till their fields. The cost of an army is not paid only in silver. It is paid in unfilled fields. It is paid in empty granaries. It is paid in children who grow up hungry because their fathers are at the front. It is paid in wives who grow old alone because their husbands never came back. Hostile armies may face each other for years, striving for the victory which is decided in a single day. This being so, to remain in ignorance of the enemy's condition, simply because one grudges the outlay of 100 ounces of silver in honors and emoluments, is the height of inhumanity. The general who will not pay for spies is the general who does not care about his men. He will let the war drag on for years. He will let thousands die. He will let the treasury be drained. All to save 100 ounces of silver. That is the height of inhumanity. One who acts thus is no leader of men, no present help to his sovereign, no master of victory. Thus, what enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer, and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men, is foreknowledge. Now this foreknowledge cannot be elicited from spirits. It cannot be obtained inductively from experience, nor by any deductive calculation. Knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be obtained from other men. This is the secret of the chapter. Foreknowledge is the foundation of victory. And foreknowledge cannot be obtained by prayer. It cannot be obtained by studying the stars. It cannot be obtained by reasoning from past battles. It can only be obtained from other men, from men who have seen the enemy, from men who have lived with the enemy, from men who have served the enemy, spies, hence the use of spies, of whom there are 5 classes. Local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, surviving spies. When these 5 kinds of spy are all at work, none can discover the secret system. This is called divine manipulation of the threads. It is the sovereign's most precious faculty, Having local spies means employing the services of the inhabitants of a district. Having inward spies means making use of officials of the enemy. Having converted spies means getting hold of the enemy's spies and using them for our own purposes. Having doomed spies means doing certain things openly for purposes of deception, and allowing our spies to know of them and report them to the enemy. Having surviving spies means those who bring back news from the enemy's camp. Hence it is that with none in the whole army are more intimate relations to be maintained than with spies. In no other business should greater secrecy be preserved. Spies cannot be usefully employed without a certain intuitive sagacity. Without subtle ingenuity of mind, one cannot make certain of the truth of their reports. Be subtle, and use your spies for every kind of business. If a secret piece of news is divulged by a spy before the time is ripe, he must be put to death together with the man to whom the secret was told. Whether the object be to crush an army, to storm a city, or to assassinate an individual. It is always necessary to begin by finding out the names of the attendants, the aides de camp, the doorkeepers and sentries of the general in command. Our spies must be commanded to make these inquiries. The enemy's spies who have come to spy on us must be sought out, tempted with bribes, led away, and comfortably housed. Thus they will become converted spies and available for our service. It is through the information brought by the converted spy that we are able to acquire and employ the local and inward spies. It is owing to his information again that we can cause the doomed spy to carry false tidings to the enemy. Lastly, it is by his information that the surviving spy can be sent on his mission in time. The end and aim of spying in all its 5 varieties is knowledge of the enemy. And this knowledge can only be derived in the first instance from the converted spy. Hence it is essential that the converted spy be treated with the utmost liberality. Of old, the rise of the Yin dynasty was due to Ai Qi, who had served under the Heixia. Likewise, the rise of the Zhou dynasty was due to Liu Ya, who had served under the Yin. Hence it is only the enlightened ruler and the wise general who will use the highest intelligence of the army for purposes of spying, and thereby they achieve great results. Spies are a most important element in war, because on them depends an army's ability to move. This is the close of the book. Sun Tzu ends where he began, with knowledge. The first chapter taught us that victory is won by calculation in the temple. The last chapter teaches us that calculation requires information, and information requires spies. Without spies, there is no information. Without information, there is no calculation. Without calculation, there is no victory. There is only the gamble. The general who does not use spies is gambling. He is throwing his men against an enemy he does not know. He is fighting blind. He may win by luck. He will more likely lose by ignorance. The wise general does not gamble. He buys information. He buys it with silver. He buys it with patience. He buys it with cunning. He sends local spies to ask questions of the inhabitants. He sends inward spies to corrupt the enemy's officials. He turns the enemy's own spies into his own. He feeds false information to the enemy through doomed spies. He sends surviving spies to bring back the truth. 5 threads, all in his hand. He weaves them into a picture of the enemy. He sees what the enemy is. He sees what the enemy plans. He sees what the enemy fears. He sees what the enemy will do. Then he strikes. And the enemy wonders how he was so well informed. The enemy wonders how the general knew. The general knew because he paid. He paid in silver. He paid in patience. He paid in trust. He paid the converted spy with liberality. He paid the surviving spy with honors. He paid the local spy with kindness. He paid the inward spy with gold. He paid the doomed spy with silence. That is the price of victory. It is paid before the battle. It is paid in secret. It is paid by men whose names no one will ever know. Consider the men Sun Tzu praises at the end, Ai Qi, Liu Ya. These are not generals. These are not kings. These are men who carried secrets from one kingdom to another. They were the highest intelligence of their age. They were the spies who founded dynasties. Sun Tzu ends the book with this thought: the enlightened ruler and the wise general will use the highest intelligence of the army for purposes of spying, not the bravest, not the most disciplined, not the most loyal, the most intelligent. Spies must be intelligent, they must be subtle, they must be patient, they must be loyal, they must be willing to die without anyone ever knowing their name. These men are rare, these men are precious. These men are the foundation of every campaign. The book is now complete. It began with the temple where calculations are made. It moved through the cost of war. It taught us to win without fighting. It showed us how to stand so defeat is impossible. It showed us how to release energy at the right moment. It showed us where to strike and where to defend. It taught us how to march without losing our army. It taught us when to vary our plans. It taught us how to read the enemy's signs. It taught us how to read the ground. It taught us how to read the 9 situations that test an army's soul. It warned us of the cost of fire and anger, and it ends with the spy, the one who makes all the rest possible. For the spy gives the general foreknowledge, and foreknowledge is the foundation of every calculation. And calculation is the foundation of every victory. Know the enemy. Know yourself. You need not fear the result of 100 battles. That is the lesson of Sun Tzu. It has been the lesson for 2,500 years. It will be the lesson for as long as men go to war. The instruments change. The terrain changes. The armies change. The lesson does not. Victory belongs to the one who knows. Defeat belongs to the one who guesses. The wise general does not guess. He knows. He pays the price of knowing. He sends the spies. He listens to their reports. He checks their reports against each other. He sends them out again. He waits. He calculates. He plans. He acts. And when he acts, the enemy wonders what happened. The enemy never saw the spy. The enemy never saw the calculation. The enemy never saw the plan. The enemy saw only the result, that is the art of war. It is invisible until the moment it strikes. It is patient until the moment it moves. It is silent until the moment it roars. It is the art of the temple, the art of the mind, the art of the spy. It is the art of winning before the battle begins. It is the art of Sun Tzu. Read this book again. Read it slowly. Read it as the commentator Cao Cao. Read it in the 3rd century after Christ. Read it as Tu Mu. Read it in the 9th century. Read it as Lionel Giles read it in London in 1910. Read it as generals have read it on every battlefield since. The 13 chapters do not change. What changes is the reader. The first time you read this book, you see tactics. The second time you see strategy. The third time you see philosophy. The fourth time you see yourself. The general who reads this book and is unchanged by it was not paying attention. The general who reads this book and is humbled by it has begun to understand. The general who reads this book and is silent has understood everything. That is the art of war. It does not promise victory. It promises clarity. With clarity comes the possibility of victory. Without clarity there is only the gamble. And the gamble is what Sun Tzu spent 13 chapters trying to talk you out of. The art of war is the art of refusing to gamble. It is the art of knowing so much that gambling becomes unnecessary. It is the art of the temple, the calculation, the spy, the ground, the fire, the maneuver. It is the art of the general who knows before he fights. It is the art of the general who wins before he moves. It is the art of Sun Tzu. It is the art of war.